Our next one comes from Dark Rating, and the title here is LLM Hijackers Quickly Incorporate DeepSeek API Key. So this is not a surprising development. Access to LLMs on cloud hosting companies is typically fairly expensive computationally and from a billing perspective. And it's not hard to imagine that access is useful to all manner of people and would in particular be useful to use without having to pay the bill. I can tell you, having worked at a cloud provider, I saw lots and lots and lots of instances where customer accounts had been compromised, typically through some issue caused by the customer, which facilitated access to some adversary having the ability to create resources in their account. And almost exclusively, although not, there were some edge cases, almost exclusively they were used to mine cryptocurrency. And this is a new permutation of that. And rather than mining cryptocurrency, they're creating resources. They're creating these LLM resources, and then further, they're packaging them up in a way that allows many people through a proxy to use an LLM that is being paid for by some unwitting victim of credential theft, where the access to their cloud account has been compromised. That access is added to a proxy server, and then basically arbitrary people, I suppose sometimes they pay for that access and sometimes they don't, are able to use that proxy server and run their their LLM workloads without having to pay the actual cost. And so they talk about in this article how that can be quite expensive, on the order of hundreds of thousands of dollars. They talk about one particular case where someone in the course of 24 hours racked up a $700 bill and only caught it because he had his AWS account billing alert set so that when his normal $2 per month spend was exceeded, he got an alert and was able to shut it off. And I think AWS even forgave that $700 bill. But he was on path. He was on a path to have like a $20,000 bill for the month, which is really quite crazy. And so you can I think this was an individual person, right? It wasn't not like a company, but you can certainly see that how if you are a company, and Lord knows most cloud provider bills are pretty obtuse and unapproachably complex. It's not hard to imagine that this could happen to you, and people are leeching off of your bills, and you're maybe not even aware of it because it's just kind of blending into the background of your monthly bills. But look, this can and has been used to do malicious things. So I don't necessarily know that you're creating like a legal exposure for yourself, but you're certainly contributing to some bad stuff happening in the world.
Yeah, just to reemphasize, this isn't just ripping off services from the LLM providers. It's not ripping it off from ChatGPT or DeepSeek. It's their customers their API keys that they're billed against is getting used by third parties. So your account, if you're one of these victims, is what's getting charged for doing this. And uh, that's what makes us, and they load balance it out basically through these reverse proxies over many, many different. So it's really hard to identify. It's really hard to know where the source is. And then they're selling, probably, we don't know exactly the economics, but they're selling access to using your account to go talk to these LLMs and do whatever they want to do, running up those charges. So, yeah, I mean, in a worst case scenario, somebody could be generating child porn images or other very, very nasty material that now you're associated with, which is even a worse case scenario than just a financial problem. So yeah, and I fear a little bit, especially with the case of DeepSeek, as we've seen so many reports come out uh, showing that their security is very weak and their concern around security seems to be very weak. Best we can tell from afar, just looking at the reports coming out, I fear that it, it may be a little easy or too easy to get access to these API keys. And this is as all these other potential LLMs just rush into this market. Security sometimes is a laggard in terms of getting it locked down well, and they're just innovating so fast that security is trying to play catch up. And I think this contributes to that problem.
Yeah, I think that let's certainly agree with what you said. And I think to carry that further, I think the consumers are equally moving fast and immature too. And so I think that's where I saw a lot of problems emerging on just the kind of the vanilla cloud side, is that you have a lot of relatively immature companies spinning up resources, and their focus is on developing an application. And they make a misstep, they contribute they commit some source code into public GitHub that has an API key, and suddenly now people are able, some adversary collects that key. By the way, we found that that was happening like in minutes. They would collect the API key and then launch resources in that cloud account to, and again, typically it was to mine cryptocurrency, but in this instance, it's to use LLM, which is a very expensive, relatively speaking, a very expensive workload to be having hijacked from you. So, um, it's I think for most entities, it's going to be a financial impact. It's not like necessarily it's going to provide access and some data of yours or what have you. Although depending on what the keys have access to, it could, right? Like the core of the issue here is that adversaries are finding valid API keys or credentials to these whether they're cloud accounts or AI service accounts. They're finding working credentials, and then they're using those. Now,
And if you've got like a corporate private instance or corporate private tenant of one of these, with the concept of that you're submitting all this sort of sensitive data with the assumption that it'll be private, now you've got a bad actor potentially being able to extract some of that very sensitive information that you've sent to that LLM instance. Maybe. I mean, that's not the direct version of what's going on here, but it's certainly possible.
yeah, so
So,
it's not a net new, like the initial intrusion isn't net new. Like this is stuff we've talked about for quite some time. We have to do a better job at protecting our secrets, authentication keys, API keys, passwords, and whatnot. This is just a new harm that can come as a result of not doing that well.
yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this evolves. It's a brave new world around all these LLMs.